Tonight, it's all things Ole Miss. Grab a drink and join us on tonight's Tailgate. All right, well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on the Tailgate tonight. As always, I am Luke, and I am joined by Michael tonight. And with us, we have a guest on today from Locked On Ole Miss. We've got Steven Willis. Steven, how you doing today, my friend?
Man, I'm doing outstanding. How are you guys doing?
Right. We're doing good, So besides those audio issues, we're doing a little bit good, but everything's fixed now. We're going to be fine, so we're rocking and rolling. But we appreciate you being on with us tonight.
Yeah.
One of the questions we kind of like to start off with people is just Ole Miss. Have you been a fan your whole life? Like, what kind of got you into the Ole Miss fandom?
Listen, I've been a fan my whole life. I was no choice to be a part of this. My second Ole Miss football game I ever went to was the Immaculate Deflection, the wind blown back field goal in 1983.
Wow.
Okay. And once that happened, it was essentially over.
Yeah, that kind of gets you hooked real quick there, going to a game like that. I mean, I can't imagine that being your second game and it just being like, okay, yeah, I'm good. I'm staying here.
Yeah. Yeah, I peaked early, I guess.
Well, I mean, you say you peaked early. This is going to be a good year to be a Rebel, I think. I mean, it's looking good in terms of coaching. You didn't lose much, if really anything at all, right? I mean, you got a new secondary coach, a new passing game coordinator and tight end coach. Is that right? Am I missing anybody more?
So yeah, George McDonald, the wide receiver coach and tight ends coach. They got a cornerback / co-defensive coordinator and Brian Brown, who came from Cincinnati.
That's right.
And overall, they just have a nice staff, potentially the best staff that Ole Miss has ever had on campus at one time. And because of that, the talent has gone up, and absolutely through the roof, to the point where On3 is like doing their top 10 national teams, and Ole Miss has literally been on every single list they've had.
Yep.
They've done all of the offense, and they're into the defense. And I just look at that, and it's like, you know what? Me being an Ole Miss fan since 1982, 83, in that time frame, I've earned this.
Yeah. I mean,
I have earned this year.
Yeah,
you paid your dues.
I remember talking with an Ole Miss fan last year. I was over at a Tennessee game, and I ran into him at one of the bars after the game, and he was just like, we're usually just fine with like a 10-2, 9-3 season. And I'm like, I feel like this year, like y'all's floor can't even be even close to that. Like it has to be like an 11-1 or a 12-0. You know, like what I mean? You guys are just set up for that because you guys have such a good roster, such a mature roster that's coming back. Me being a Tennessee fan, I have my qualms with Lane Kiffin, but I have to admit he's a phenomenal coach when he's not leaving your team high and dry. But, it's one of those things, like, I think you guys are set up for tons of success, and I totally get the love that you guys are getting in, like, all the preseason rankings and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah. We would react to 9-3 right now like we normally would to 5-7. So we are unbelievably cocky, and we have absolutely no right to be, but we're going to enjoy all.
Yeah, well, and you should be. And I was actually listening. I was in my garage working out today, and I was listening to your podcast that was released today, the 14th. And you mentioned that, like, On3, like the top 10. And like to be honest, you said that, and I immediately stopped and I pulled out my phone and I started going through and looking and going, okay, is this really like I hadn't heard that, and it's 100% right. And for me, I'm not hearing that much about Ole Miss that I would expect to hear from how good their roster is.
Mm-hmm.
What is it about them that they're just not getting the love of Ohio State or Georgia or Texas? I mean, even Colorado's in the media, I think, more, maybe not for the right reasons, but why do you think there's just not as much going on for Ole Miss there?
Because they're Ole Miss. I mean, this Ole Miss roster, just change the jerseys. Don't do anything else.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers on the side of the helmet, the Crimson, that's the number one team in the country.
Gotcha.
Put a G on the side of the helmet, it's the number one team in the country.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But since it's Ole Miss, they're like, okay, we're going to put you at number 5 and compartmentalize you in a certain way like this, because this we're going to hedge our bets a little bit because you look good. I mean, your roster is absolutely gorgeous. I compare the roster to like Kathy Ireland. You know, it's a supermodel of a roster.
Oh, yeah.
But Ole Miss doesn't normally have a roster like that. I compared the Ole Miss fan base recently on a podcast. It's kind of like a 6 or a 7 that's dating a 10. And they're nervous about that 10 going out and do it because you're always afraid something's going to go wrong and they're going to leave.
Sure.
And Ole Miss fans are pretty insecure about that, which they deserve for the, you know, people that have been fans since the 80s, 90s, and the early 2000s.
Yeah.
But when you look at what this team could be, if you could just have some self-confidence about it and see what you actually have, and the fact that nobody is running for the door. It's funny, all the haters against Ole Miss, there's two separate things you hear. First of all, Ole Miss is throwing money around. They're buying this team. They're doing the New York Yankees thing.
Yep.
The other thing is the checks are bouncing, which is it. It is just a situation where people do not know how to handle an Ole Miss that is going through this situation because their standard go-to digs, they don't work.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking when all of this stuff, when all those little rumors started flying around, especially at the early transfer portal season earlier this year, when I was like, what I was thinking was it was Lane Kiffin going, hey, no, we're going to offer you this amount of money. And he then goes back to y'all's collective and goes, yeah, we're offering them this kind of money, whether you have it or not, you've got to find it. And it's just like, I'm like, because it is one of those things, you guys had such an amazing portal class. I'm not saying you guys bought them, but it's just one of those things like, it just seems like something that Lane Kiffin would do because he wants to win. He wants to win. He wants his team to win. His team has worked hard to win, and he wants to set up for success, and he's going to make the collective pay if that's what he needs to do, is what it kind of pointed to for me. What are your takes on that?
A couple of the collectives out there are kind of playing 4D chess right now.
Sure.
Yeah. The same player that would go to, say, Mississippi State, and this isn't a dig at Mississippi State before anybody hears that, is going to have to pay more than a player that was going to Ole Miss. The same player. You might have a situation for Mississippi State where you have to offer a quarterback at Mississippi State $500,000. Ole Miss could get that same player for $200,000.
Yep, sure. Totally makes sense.
And that is because that Ole Miss has branded this as fun. It's a completely fun thing. You look at spring practice, they do all of the Pro Bowl games type stuff, and it's a kinder, gentler with no tackling to the ground because the one thing that's true about football is everybody hates practicing football.
Yeah. So
the less you do it, the more fun you can be, and you have the fire extinguisher on the sideline. There's puppies. You get your pictures taken with $200,000 sports cars. That is the brand that has been built up by Lane Kiffin, and because of that, Ole Miss can be efficient and get a little bit of a discount when it comes to the collective. And they're not playing the same game right now that the lower end teams, and that is, like I said, that isn't a dig, but the people that are behind in the collective, they're not having to play catch up.
Sure.
Right. I talked on my podcast all the time. Ole Miss is about in the transfer portal now, filling roles on their team, not holes on their team.
Sure.
And whenever desperation figures in, like LSU on the defensive line, they're looking for anything smoking, anything with a heartbeat. And they are willing, even though he says he's not willing to buy players, all of a sudden, somebody that's kind of been shopped around, all of a sudden he's popping up on the radar. It's a situation to where they're desperate and that everybody knows when they have you bent over a barrel, especially now that the players have this kind of power. And if that happens, the prices, they can get astronomical. But if you have that, it's kind of like a girl. You know, everybody's been to a frat party. Everybody's been looking for girls out trolling in the early 20s. If you're desperate, you're not going home with anybody. If you act like you don't care and you're very aloof, you could probably have any girl in that bar. And that's kind of what Ole Miss is doing.
Confidence is key. And, I mean, who's not going to want to go to Ole Miss and watch Joey Chestnut down how many hot dogs? I don't even remember how many he did at that one.
Oh, yeah. I think he did like 32.
Yeah.
Just goofing off.
Easy day for it.
Training for it. Yeah.
Yeah. And Brian Kelly's he's going to say he's not paying for a player until a player actually decides he wants to take the check. And then he's fully behind it.
Listen, what Brian Kelly and Hugh Freeze did, and the Boise State coach did it as well. That's fan base suicide.
Yes,
that's fun when you're on the rubber chicken circuit in May, and you can say we're doing things the right way. We're not going to play that game. We're not going to buy that player. Let them throw up a 6-6. Watch how quickly that gets clicked. That is fan base suicide.
Yeah, they're going to call for his head the minute it happens.
Oh yeah. I think Hugh Freeze is going to have a little bit more rope just because of how young the team is.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there's LSU.
Brian Harsin.
Well, that's fair. That's fair. I know Alabama or Auburn, I should say, has beaten Alabama or hasn't beaten Alabama pretty much at all recently. They came close last year. They haven't beaten Alabama recently at all. And Hugh Freeze knows how to beat Alabama. Auburn really, really loves that about Hugh Freeze. So it's one of those things like
he's got to do it.
He's got to do it. And so, yeah.
Auburn is that school that you, like I just talked about earlier, you can smell the desperation.
Oh, yeah. No, 100%.
And the other thing, like the quarterback, why does nobody like Jackson Dart? I
don't know. Yeah.
I think that he's one of the best quarterbacks out there. He's tied for, third in the current Heisman rankings. I mean, there's like 6 quarterbacks in there, 6 players in that round, but he's tied for third, especially now that Judkins left. I think you're going to start looking at a more pass-heavy. I mean, you got some great running backs that came in, but when you lose the two-time SEC rushing leader, I think he's going to get a lot more throws. I mean, I've got him. I don't even think I can say, I feel bad calling him a dark horse. I think that he is in that top 1, 2, 3 of who's going to be the Heisman. So what are your thoughts on him?
I think Jackson Dart has a chance after the season to be the GOAT at Ole Miss.
Sure.
Yeah, I think he'll own every record that a quarterback can have with the exception of passing touchdowns. He's going to allow Eli Manning to hold on to that record.
Yeah, that's nice of him.
But at the end of this, he'll have potentially 30 wins as a starter.
Mm-hmm.
That is a big deal. And this offense has a chance to be very, very explosive. You're a Tennessee fan. You just said that.
Mm-hmm.
The 2022 Tennessee offense, this offense has the potential to be that.
Oh, I agree.
I think Trey Harris is the best wide receiver in the country. We all know what Juice Wells can be when he's healthy.
100%. Yeah.
And Jordan Watkins might be the most underrated player in the Southeastern Conference. And that's just the starters. Ole Miss also has Deion Smith coming in, who is a player that he flunked out of LSU as a freshman and kind of went the Mississippi Last Chance U situation to try and get eligible. He's finally going to make it back to a 4-year school. He's picked Ole Miss, and this is a guy that has Randy Moss level ability.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you talk about an unbelievable catch radius, a 4.3 40, 6'4", all of that stuff. Where are you going to play? Who's going to sit down? Is it going to be Jordan Watkins, Juice Wells? Is it? It's not going to be Trey Harris. He's the best receiver in the country. That is the embarrassment of riches right now that Jackson Dart is going to have at his disposal. And when you look at that, and if he gets going, Mike Detillier came on my show a couple of months ago and talked about how excited he was that Jackson Dart was coming back, because he said to me, year 3 in a Lane Kiffin system with Jackson Dart, could see him make a Jaden Daniels level jump.
Sure.
Not talent-wise, he's not as fast as Jaden Daniels, but he could be as effective as Jaden.
Sure.
And if he is, Ole Miss might not be losing a football game this year, and that includes the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, I can definitely see that.
Oh yeah, totally. So I'm going to delve with you a little bit. Just follow us there. If Florida has a terrible season this year, and they fire Billy Napier, there's been some rumblings about your coach going to Florida. Now, obviously, that's not coming from your coach at all. That's coming from everyone else in the SEC, because we've seen Lane Kiffin do Lane Kiffin things. What are your thoughts on that? What are you like, regardless of how you guys do this year? Let's say you guys make it to the national championship. Like what, but there's a spot that opens up at Florida. What are you guys thinking? Are you guys thinking that Ole Miss is going to just do whatever it takes to lock him down, or what are your thoughts? I mean, what are people saying?
Lane Kiffin is making over $9 million sure now. Yes. And he is basically the mayor of that town. He can do whatever he wants to. In the middle of recruiting season, he can go off and take a week in South Florida, get on a fishing boat. He has that ability here. He's not going to have that ability anywhere else.
Sure.
The rumor that I have heard from other Locked On hosts and everything, especially when in regards to the Florida Gators, is Lane Kiffin does not mesh well with whoever the board of trustees is at the University of Florida.
That makes sense.
University of Florida is not a place that I'm worried about losing Lane Kiffin to. Now, it could happen. Florida could come say, hey, here's $15 million.
Yeah.
Will you take it?
Yeah.
Lane Kiffin's going to be like, yes, I will. And that'll be fine. Ole Miss would just hire Pete Golding and kind of keep it going. But the program, if you want the program that I have my own, the program that I'm worried about if it ever comes open of Lane Kiffin actually bailing for is the University of Miami.
Oh,
I think the U and Lane Kiffin, it's a marriage that is waiting to happen. And I need Mario Cristobal to win some games this year. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, my prediction is that Miami's going to be in that 1-2 spot. I think they're playing in the ACC championship. But
well, I mean, we had a Florida State rep on a couple weeks ago, and he was saying, University of Miami is the team that has always underachieved with the most talent. So hopefully that's not the case this year. Maybe
obviously Florida State doesn't know about Texas A&M.
That's true.
Very true.
Apparently they haven't met, or as I call them, Texas 8-4.
Yeah. That's fair.
I'll give you credit for that 3 times, and then I think I'm stealing it.
I'm interested to see what Elko does, but yes, I totally get you.
Now, one of the other things that I thought I absolutely loved, I heard again your podcast from today, from the 14th, that you were on special teams, that you were, I'm guessing, were you a punter? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
I actually did a whole segment on the punt game.
And I loved it. Like, I don't think that the special teams gets enough love throughout anything. And obviously, I don't want you to have to like relive it, because I want our guys anybody who's watching this to go watch you on that episode. But just the love that you had for the special teams was so awesome, and how you essentially said, who cares about a punter when what was it? Who cares about a punter when you're 8-4? It's when you get to 10-2 where you need a good punter. So do you mind giving just like a real quick rundown of that for us?
Yeah, a little bit. Last year, despite average, Frazier Mason at Ole Miss did not punt the ball very well. He's very inconsistent. And there were games where he averaged 30 yards in the game, 30 yards per kick in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do that against Furman and MTSU and Georgia Southern, you'll be fine.
Sure.
But if that comes out against Georgia and LSU and Oklahoma, that could be problematic. It could be the difference between 9-3 and 12-0. Hidden yardage is the most underrated thing in college football.
Mm-hmm.
Hidden yardage is an example of that. If you're punting the ball from your 45, keeping it out of the end zone, giving them the first possession at the 3-yard line as opposed to the 20, that 17 yards is hidden yardage. When you have a defense that's supposed to be elite, the further the offense has to go, the better off it'll be. And the punter will do that. It was one of these secret sauces of Kirby Smart, Nick Saban at Alabama, what they built, is to make your defense, them go against your defense to the point where their punter keeps pinning you back and back and back, to eventually you break. And all of a sudden they get a gimme touchdown in a short field and all of that stuff. And it makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, sure.
Whenever you do not punt the ball well, all of a sudden you cannot win field position. Whenever there's a changeover over and over, you're going to lose yardage in that every time, and eventually your defense is going to be the defense that breaks. So I am a big proponent in hidden yardage, and I think that if you're going to be 10-2 and 11-1, the way that you win a championship is through hidden yardage. Like I said, it doesn't matter if you're 8-4 or 5-7. At that point, you're just trying to survive. That comes whenever you're 10-2 and above, because you need the little things to mean that much more.
Yeah.
And those little things are going to be the reason you're going to be really good.
It was beautiful. I watched that 3 times today because it was just so, I love how you talked about it. I love how you break that down. It was just beautiful. So thank you.
No problem. Now, I was a high school field goal kicker. I like special teams. That's something I've always done, and you have to figure out a way to talk about it in today's podcast world. You know all about that.
Yep.
You can't just have a random episode on special teams unless you team it a certain way, or nobody's going to watch that. You have to figure out a way to couch that in a certain way so you can have the conversation you want to have.
Well, you did it beautifully. And anybody who's watching this, Locked on Ole Miss, this was the 14th of May when we're recording. Go watch it because it was great.
True.
And So now that'll bring us into just kind of your projections for this year. Going through the schedule, obviously Ole Miss has got probably one of the best teams out there in terms of talent, if not the best team. So as you go through this schedule, there's a bunch of teams in there that, could give you some trouble. What are you predicting for this year?
The easy prediction is 10-2.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. I think that's the baseline that you hear most everywhere. I haven't done W's and L's because the roster is not finalized.
Sure.
I don't like W's and L's until July because of that reason. But if you look at the schedule, the first 4 games are non-conference games.
Mm-hmm.
For Ole Miss to be a playoff team, they have to go 4-0 in those games.
Sure.
There's no way around it.
Mm-hmm.
Then you have Kentucky. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin has done pretty well against Kentucky. Brock Vandegrift and those guys coming in town, they're coming into Oxford, should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got, I think, Arkansas, maybe.
South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. That could be tricky in Columbia. I had Bill Flowers, a former Ole Miss player, on there, and he said that Columbia, South Carolina was the hardest place that he played.
Really?
Yeah, he said that's an incredibly difficult place to play football.
Yeah.
But Ole Miss should beat that South Carolina. Something went horrible wrong.
Yeah, it's hard for you to win in South Carolina where they don't water the grass. Anyway, sorry to break your stride there.
Yeah, but the second half of the season is where it gets interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That game at LSU, Ole Miss has gone to Baton Rouge undefeated 2 times in the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
They've lost both of those games.
Mm-hmm.
In 2014 and 2022, they've lost those games. So this is going to be a situation that Ole Miss needs to show up and win that game. They have a better football team than LSU, but they can't let Tiger Stadium be worth 15 points.
Yeah, sure.
And because it's going to be prime time, it's going to be ABC, it's going to be a whole bunch of Cajuns really drunk, and they're going to be making earthquakes that night. That's because LSU fans, they like to be dismissive about Ole Miss, but watch how they react when Ole Miss is.
Oh, yeah.
That's how you know how they really feel. And they charged the field twice after beating Ole Miss, those undefeated games. That lets you know how much it means to them.
Sure.
So if Ole Miss can get through that game, then they have a game at Fayetteville, if I'm not mistaken.
Mm-hmm.
No?
Oklahoma. That's at Oklahoma.
Yeah, they get Oklahoma, and then they get Georgia, and then Fayetteville.
I think it's reverse. So it's Oklahoma, Arkansas, Georgia.
Yeah, Arkansas is the true sandwich game. Believe it or not, the game that I'm afraid of most on Ole Miss's schedule is Ole Miss at Arkansas. I'm not afraid of Georgia as much as this, and this is even after Georgia beat Ole Miss 52-17 a year ago.
Ooh.
Ole Miss and Fayetteville, weird stuff happens in that game. Ole Miss can beat them in Little Rock, they can beat them in Oxford, but the games in Fayetteville, they haven't beat them since 2008. Yeah, it's a weird place. Now, like I said, if Ole Miss plays them anywhere else, they beat them.
Right.
Sure.
They don't beat them there. Then you have the Florida game that has a chance to be very weird, as you know.
Yep.
And Mississippi State, at that point, they could be just playing out the string.
Right.
So I think 10-2 is a good bet before the roster.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, that makes total sense. So, yeah, that's the Suey Pigs. Those are they're an interesting team. They're a very interesting team. So, well, thank you so much for being on.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, we appreciate, your podcast, your shows, everything that you do. Just real quick, can you kind of just let our listeners know and our watchers know where they can find you?
You can find me on the YouTube channel Locked on Ole Miss. You can find me on Twitter at the Steven Willis. You can catch my other show that I do with a Georgia fan, with a Tennessee fan, and with an Alabama fan called SEC After Dark on YouTube. We do that on Wednesday night. It's a live stream, 9 Eastern, 8 Central. We go for about an hour, and at this time of year, we're just completely off the rails talking about crazy stuff. But during football season, it is really good to see. It's a lot of fun, but you can catch me in those places, man.
Awesome.
Well, go check Steven out. Again, we appreciate you coming on with us, and we'll see you again.
All right, man. Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Have a good night.
You too.